I did not go to graduate school at the University of Maryland to study the ways harmful laws and social policies affect members of marginalized and stigmatized social groups. In fact, when I entered my PhD program in 2004, I had only the vaguest idea of what I wanted to do with my life. But I was hoping for a career in scholarship and teaching that would involve exposing how systems of inequality affect our everyday lives. And after a 4-year stint in Arizona post-graduation, I never thought I would wind up in a state that would actually outdo Sheriff Joe Arpaio, the Show Me Your Papers law, the so-called ethnic studies ban in Tucson public schools. But Tennessee has distinguished itself for the uniquely creative and aggressive ways that it's targeted its lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender residents. Our legislators have tried to pass bills that would require transgender people to use the bathroom of the sex they were assigned at birth. They've even tried to ban discussion of gay people in schools. So it's no wonder that Tennessee epitomizes what scholars call structural stigma, the social and political conditions of discrimination and prejudice towards sexual and gender minorities as well as other marginalized groups. And in 2016, Republican legislators successfully crafted legislation to enable counselors to deny services to any client based on the counselor's sincerely held principles, which lawmakers originally called deeply held beliefs, but changed it because they thought that sounded too religious. Haslam signed the bill into law in April 2016, making Tennessee the first state of its kind with a so-called conscience clause for mental health care professionals. Now, the law's architects were responding to changes in the American Counseling Association's ethics code that affirm counselors' responsibility to provide competent services regardless of their beliefs. The lawmakers said this threatened Tennessee values, and they targeted LGBT people who happen to seek mental health services at rates disproportionately higher than their straight and cisgender counterparts. When the law's future was still uncertain, we here at UT, a group of applied psychology faculty, appealed directly to the governor to veto the law. We explained the fundamental principles of therapy and extensive research about barriers LGBT people face in seeking mental health services, including fears of discrimination. But despite ours and others' efforts, he signed the bill. In response to the unprecedented law, a group of faculty and graduate students here convened to study the law's effects on LGBT Tennesseans' perceptions of mental health care and their willingness to seek therapy. We wanted to know, what are this law's effects? Is it hurting Tennesseans or preventing them from seeking help? And if so, how? So with funding from the Society for the Psychological Study of Social Issues, we partnered with the Tennessee Equality Project to conduct the first statewide assessment of the law's effects. Rather than offer gift cards or a cash lottery, we incentivized participation in our online study by promising participants that we would make donations to TEP for every completed survey, and the response across the state was tremendous. The vast majority of our sample identified as white, but we did achieve geographic, sexual, and gender diversity. Half of 350 usable respondents were women, and almost 15% were genderqueer, transgender, or non-binary. A slim majority were born and raised in the suburbs, but the remaining were split between folks who grew up or currently live in rural or urban areas, and most had been to therapy. Over 75% of our respondents were aware of the law, and when asked if such a law would affect their willingness to seek counseling, their ability to trust a counselor, or their overall well-being, our participants consistently and overwhelmingly indicated that such a law would affect them, and this corresponded with general mistrust of mental health care professionals. We also observed a fascinating interaction whereby those respondents who scored highest in terms of their LGBT group identity and were aware of the law were most likely to engage in practices of self-concealment and to exhibit psychological distress. So in other words, the folks in our sample whose LGBT identity was central to who they are and who knew about the law were the ones most likely to closet themselves strategically and to experience general distress. We asked them to respond to the open-ended question, how would you define sincerely held principles? And 95% of them gave us a definition. Now recall that legislatures changed the original deeply held beliefs language because they thought it might sound too religious, but our respondents saw right through that, and they used words like believe and religion. What they actually wrote was even more illuminating. They gave us definitions such as, I'm secretly a hateful homophobe or transphobe who sticks their nose so high up birds shit on it. Sounds like discrimination, the right to be a bigot, and principles that could potentially deny a person's humanity but are justified by religion. And in follow-up interviews with a subsample of respondents, we got to know people like Maria, a 31-year-old Cookville resident who told us, quote, it's hard enough for people who need help to seek it because there's such a stigma on mental illness. And then you add the stigma of LGBT and allowing counselors to discriminate, and then you're gonna get even fewer people who are willing to put themselves out there to get help. 18-year-old Spring Hill resident Darling had a particularly candid conversation with one of our interviewers who asked them to expand on an initial definition of sincerely held principles as meaning, quote, tight ass. Darling said, quote, Yeah, sorry. Sincerely held principles basically means that I'm too snobby to care for other people who I deem below me, and therefore, if I'm racist or if I'm a homophobe or transphobe, I legally have the right to throw shit at your face, end quote. Now, Bobby, a recently divorced father of 3, told us that, quote, it's widely held among many religions that denying the gender that God made you or acting on your same-sex attraction is against the law of God, end quote. And he expressed concern about how religion could be weaponized against LGBT clients. Justin, a prominent LGBT journalist, articulated a common concern that the law's reach might extend far beyond discrimination toward LGBT people. He asked if under the new law, a Jewish psychiatrist could discriminate against Christians, or whether gay therapists might deny services to straight clients, or if a Republican decided he wouldn't treat liberals anymore. Tanner, a transgender woman from Memphis, was one of the more optimistic respondents, though she qualified her claims for sure. She said, quote, too much progress has happened in the last decade to regress this much. And given Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Alabama, you know, the crappy states, these are the ones they're going to be the last ones. We're the last to ever accept anything. Well, our work has identified deep issues of mistrust among LGBT Tennesseans, and we suspect that many straight and cisgender therapists in Tennessee have concerns about working with LGBT clients as well. Next, we hope to build trust among these communities through intergroup dialogue, and then promote mental health services with an accessible database and network of therapists who are knowledgeable about and sensitive to LGBT issues. So here I am doing exactly what I set out to do when I entered graduate school. I'm studying how inequality affects people's lives. Except I now see a path toward actually making social change. And with these data, I hope to contribute to the court case that will overturn this law and push us closer toward an expansive and inclusive vision of equality and health in Tennessee. Thank you.